In the middle of the night, in a huge office somewhere in Ukraine, a lone computer wakes up. After booting, it stays silent for a while. Then a new file pops up on the desktop. Perf C, an empty, extensionless file. A Windows folder opens, and the file gets moved there. Several seconds later, the computer shuts down. Not a soul was around to notice this small event. The next day, as the employees start their morning routine of coffee and gossip, something weird happens. Computers all over the company suddenly begin rebooting. But instead of the Windows splash screen, they display this: a ransom message. A demand for $300 worth of Bitcoin for every infected machine. The company's executives are dumbfounded. They argue and bicker before reaching a conclusion. The bottom line hangs in the balance. The company just can't afford to stop everything and wait for a fix. They transfer one payment, just to see where that will get them. Several hours pass. Nothing changes. All the machines are still encrypted. As the IT staff tries to understand what's happening, the rest of the employees get a day's leave. And on their way home, they understand that their little company wasn't alone. They became the perfect witness of the countrywide catastrophe that unfolds. Some of them visit a gas station, but can't purchase fuel. Payment systems don't work. Others choose public transport and can't get their tickets. Paying in cash might seem like an option, but all the ATMs in the vicinity are down too. Hospitals can't access their records. Utility companies can't send their bills. The postal service can't deliver packages. It's nothing short of a digital apocalypse. In a matter of hours, much of the economy of the entire country grinds to a halt. Nearly every company, institution, and service is down. And then it spills over the borders. International shipping, medicine, fuel companies, anything that had an office in Ukraine. The same red on black plague. Oops, your important files are encrypted all across their networks on thousands upon thousands of computers across the world. But not the one. The computer that woke up in the middle of the office a night before the attack. For some reason, it's fine. It continues working as if nothing happened. For years, nobody would suspect how it and several more random computers all across the world were involved in the latest and most devastating cyber attack that ever happened. It's them that held the key to answering the questions about NotPetya, a weapon that showed the world what a full-scale cyber war looks like. It happened on June 27th, 2017, and the world was never the same. The carefree air of the mid-2010s evaporated and got replaced with a new reality. There was no rollback. By 2017, devastating cyber attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure were nothing new. 2 years earlier, the country saw the first documented attack on the power grid, leaving nearly 250,000 people without electricity in the middle of a freezing winter. In 2016, the attack repeated, cutting off electricity for the capital, Kiev. Both attacks were different from your typical cybercriminal activity. They were done by people who knew the infrastructure and the inner workings of the Ukrainian electricity grid as well. They exploited some top-tier vulnerabilities and used incredibly powerful software that caused physical damage to the critical infrastructure. Anyone who got a glimpse of the code had no doubts. Those were operations only state-sponsored hacking groups were capable of. On the surface, the culprit seemed obvious. Since 2014, Ukraine was at war with Russia. It all started with a revolution in Kiev, or a coup, as Russia calls it. The Ukrainian presidential administration, notorious for its corruption, was overthrown by pro-Western citizens and politicians. At the time, the Russian military invaded and seized several regions of Ukraine in a land grab that will only be surpassed by the second invasion in 2022. As ceasefire agreements were being signed and the hot war in eastern Ukraine simmered down, the conflict moved away from the front lines. Sabotage operations, assassinations, every kind of guerrilla activity you can imagine became a daily occurrence. But now, for the first time in history, the warring sides had a new domain at their disposal. People in Ukraine and Russia lived a significant portion of their lives online. The infrastructure of both countries was heavily interconnected too. Both sides were more than eager to leverage that. By that point, Russia had ample experience in conducting offensive cyber operations. In 2007, it attacked Estonia in the world's first attempt to DDoS an entire country into chaos. In 2008, it repeated the same playbook during an invasion of Georgia, assisting its troops with digital shelling. Cybernetic attacks became an unspoken but major part of Russia's military doctrine. Each intelligence agency in the country saw it as a new tool at their disposal, but none of them were as enthusiastic as the main directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, an agency popularly known as the GRU. Following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the GRU was a relatively unknown but immensely powerful organization. Its roots go back almost a century, and its reputation was one of unrivaled ruthlessness. But by the early 2010s, almost none of that remained. The directorate was underfunded and understaffed. Many saw it as a failure, an agency completely overshadowed by the better known, freshly renamed and facelifted FSB. But something weird happened after the outbreak of the First War in eastern Ukraine. The GRU suddenly found a way to reinvent itself. One part of that was a focus on cyber attacks. Ukraine, then the rest of Eastern Europe, then the entire world. The growth was spurred by an influx of new personnel. The GRU began attracting the most talented hackers in Russia, from distinguished university graduates to notorious cyber criminals. These cyber cowboys brought their own approach to the agency's operations. They were not afraid to take initiative, improvise, and even inject some personal flair into their work. Within GRU, there was even a group that kept leaving references to Doom, Frank Herbert's seminal work of science fiction, in each piece of their custom-built malware. These references were found after the attacks on the Ukrainian electricity grid in 2015 and 2016. Capitalizing on their discovery, the researchers were quick to give this hacker group an appropriate name: Sandworm. As the first reports on Sandworm's activities were published, complete with a list of nods to the book, Dune references ceased immediately. The attacks did not. Their attribution became more difficult. But by this point, the Sandworm performed enough attacks to become recognizable. The tools they used, the hours they operated, the barely perceptible calligraphy of their code. But above all, it was the targets. Few threat actors in the world were so focused on breaking specialized software, like industrial control systems. Even fewer were so proficient at it, and nobody else was as persistent at aligning their targets with political goals at the Russian Federation. The attack that defined Sandworm began on June 27, 2017. On one hand, the choice of this particular date seemed straightforward. It was the eve of a national holiday in Ukraine. Attacking on this day would carry a symbolic message, and be more difficult to mitigate due to staff shortages. On the other hand, some researchers suggest there might have been another motive for launching NotPetya on that day, a motive hidden behind the perf.c file.
So you did the thing. Or maybe you're thinking about doing the thing, and now your brain won't shut up about it. Wait, was that the right way to say it? Wait a second.
The nature of the internet makes attacking one country extremely difficult. Countries are interconnected. Many institutions and companies don't even host their own websites, relying on cloud infrastructure and keeping the data in server farms elsewhere in the world. However, Sandworm found a clever way to bypass that. It infiltrated Medoc, a Ukrainian tax software tied to the whole Ukrainian economy. Each company that paid taxes in Ukraine had to run Medoc on at least one of their computers. Hence, there was at least one computer that could lead to every company in the entire Ukraine. Medoc was infiltrated several years prior to 2017 through a simple phishing message with attached malware. After tricking an unwitting company employee into clicking it, the hackers snuck in and created a robust backdoor inside Medoc systems. By doing this, they ensured access to every update Medoc pushed out, and every computer where its software was installed. On June 27, it was time for another update. As people across Ukraine piled into their offices, chit-chatting about their holiday plans, the update was downloaded in the background, and something was hidden inside it. That something was a small piece of malware with an enormous virulent potential. NotPetya. It was a computer worm, and like with any worm, its goal was to replicate. It tried doing that by hopping onto every computer connected to the initial infection point through the local area network, or LAN. However, most systems are engineered to prevent such hopping, and to bypass that, the malware used a tool known as Mimikatz. It was a proof-of-concept exploit created several years prior by Benjamin Delpy, a famous engineer who wanted to show that Windows had a huge problem. All Windows machines stored their passwords in an insecure manner, and Microsoft did nothing to change that. Nothing changed even after Delpy published his proof of concept for all to see. Microsoft simply ignored it, but cyber criminals did not. By using Mimikatz, NotPetya could jump into any computer on the network and gain administrator access to it. When that didn't work, It applied two other exploits, Eternal Blue and Eternal Romance. Both of them were developed by the U.S. National Security Agency as incredibly advanced cyber weapons. They used an obscure feature in Windows, one that allowed for direct sharing of information between computers. Eternal Blue and Eternal Romance exploited this feature to share malicious code, and eventually take over any computer on the same network. Both of them were snatched from the hands of the NSA by an enigmatic hacker group known as Shadow Brokers, and posted online in one of the greatest leaks in the history of cybercrime. They immediately got integrated into some of the most destructive malicious programs ever developed, NotPetya being one of them. Eternal Blue and Eternal Romance allowed the malware to reach further than Mimikatz alone, and thanks to this combination, a single device with MeDoc was enough to spread NotPetya to an entire network. Once inside, the worm would wait for 1 hour, probing around and trying to find more ways to spread. At the same time, it would run another task, encryption. Each file on the computer would get subjected to a simple algorithm, turning it into gibberish, unreadable and unusable, losing all the data inside. 1 hour to do that. Plenty of time, even for the most cluttered hard drives. After encryption was complete, the device would reboot. The worm would display a message saying that a corrupted file system was being fixed. In reality, it was doing the opposite of that. The worm would spend this time encrypting the master boot record, the foundational piece of code that starts the computer and runs its operating system. Without it, Windows can't launch. After rebooting, the worm displayed a message, a set of instructions to transfer a small sum of money to a Bitcoin wallet. This was another layer of obfuscation. There was no mechanism to decrypt the gibberish all of the computer's data was turned into, no matter how much money you paid. It was a wiper, masquerading as ransomware. The obfuscation worked. Initial attempts to battle the attack were thrown off track. The pattern coincided with Petya, a popular piece of ransomware cybersecurity professionals knew how to deal with. Only a while later, after countless unsuccessful attempts to stop it, did the researchers understand that this was not Petya, not Petya.
I thought I'd build a proof of concept AI agent using Temporal. So what's cool about my agent is the workflow code itself is completely generic. I just provide these as input to my workflow, which is a couple hundred lines of Python code. It's all LLM from there. Over here, I can see that I've got my agent workflow running. You can see the event history is beginning to be filled, me prompting it, the LLM responding. The agent has determined it has enough information to run its first tool. Let's confirm that, and it will run. Also, I'm going to ask it to add a couple of days either side so I can enjoy Auckland a little more. It has added a couple of days either side, and it knows I want to go to Auckland from LA. You see search flights is running here. Now it's finding real flights with a real API. Now this tool is actually using the real Stripe API. So if I go and click on that invoice, you see Stripe, my invoice is the right amount of money. Click into that invoice, you can see the flight details there. But there you have it. That is my AI agent. You can find the agent source code here in GitHub, and hopefully my proof of concept has inspired others into building AI agents using Temporal.
Work today is broken. We're all working in too many disconnected apps, and it's killing team productivity. But for the first time, there's a platform that fixes it by combining everything you need. Projects, chat, and knowledge in one place. It's all powered by the world's most complete work AI, so you can find answers from anywhere and get work done faster. Introducing ClickUp, the everything app for work.
The name stuck.